Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Freely Nourish, the podcast that empowers you to break the cycle of dieting by teaching you to nourish your body well. I am your host, registered dietitian Erin Casey, and I am also the owner of New You Nutrition Counseling, where we believe that you can reach all of your healthcare goals at just about any body size. So if you are ready to let go of that toxic shame and discomfort that comes with constantly restricting yourself and then unfortunately gorging yourself and just kind of ending up right back where you started, only feeling a lot less confident and a little defeated, then head over to our website. I'll post it in the comments and let us know how we can help you. All of our programming and content options are there. You can also book a discovery call with us to determine what options we have that might be most appropriate for you. And today I am taking a little bit of a detour from our usual content. So usually I have kind of very specific topics or items that I want to talk through with you all. And today I'm doing things a little differently. I am going a little bit more off the cuff, if you will. It may go great, it may not go great. You guys let me know how you feel about this episode, either in the comments or send me a DM, connect with me on social media. I'd love to hear from you. Normally, I have pretty detailed notes of like itemized things I want to talk to you about. As you can see, those of you who are watching me on YouTube, I'm sitting here. I have basically no makeup on my face. I'm snuggled up in like a cozy hoodie. And I am, kind of like I said, just I have a couple of notes jotted down just kind of as like prompts, I guess, for myself more, but nowhere near my level of like usual organization. And really what kind of prompted me to kind of walk through some of this with you all today. One was a conversation that I had with my husband recently, kind of about my own healing journey and kind of it coming into this entrepreneurial space and particularly a female entrepreneur. Kind of some things that has brought up for me, some challenges that I have faced. But I always want to keep it real with you all. I know that a lot of you look to me as like a source of support and a source of, in some cases, inspiration. And that flatters me. Truly, it does. But I also want to be very real and open and honest with you all that I don't have all of the answers figured out, right? There are some hard questions that we have to ask ourselves, right about now as a society. And it's there are things that I grapple with sometimes too. And I think it's, in a way, it's difficult to, when you are positioned as an expert in a particular type of field, it's sometimes difficult to admit that you don't know the answers. But I also think it's really important to admit that you don't know the answers all the time. Um, and kind of I always try to tell you all what I do know and what I don't know, but I think it's also important for you all to see that the challenges that I face as well, because we talk on here a lot about the patriarchy and a fat phobic society, and the ways in which that impacts people. And a lot of times I talk about that as if they don't impact me, and that could not be farther from the truth. They very much do. And I think anybody who struggles with any type of marginalized identity, whether it is a larger body, whether it is a female body, whether it is a trans body, black bodies, indigenous bodies, brown bodies, anything that is not a white cis het male, right? And even white cis het males. I mean, like I feel like you all face a lot of challenges in your own right as well. So today I wanted to kind of talk to you through just kind of, what it really looks like and feels like to be in this space, because I think, very often it's easy for me to get on my soapbox and sound super empowered and super, confident. But then there are things that go on behind the scenes that you all don't always get the grace to see. So it's kind of, how do I navigate it? Right. And I want to also be clear that like, I am not a mental health professional. Okay. I do have a lot of counseling training. So in a way, I think, what I have to say and what I've done is evidence-based, but also please understand that like what works for me may not work for you. Also, please understand that, a lot of my coping skills and tactics and things like that have come from I've come from professionals, right? So I think that that's kind of, first disclaimer, like I'm in therapy. I see my therapist currently about once a month, as just kind of like a routine maintenance, honestly. It is kind of like taking your car in for an oil change every 3,000 miles, right? And I think that's something that honestly we don't talk about enough. That's kind of my first topic of discussion, right? Is mental health management. It's been there's been a stigma about mental health management, it's certainly my entire lifetime. It's getting better. I will say that it's more common for people to seek mental health treatment. um, it's becoming less stigmatized, but there's still a huge stigma about it. But I think still, and just this is more of a comment on our American healthcare system and the way it's set up. And by the way it's set up, I mean that like insurance companies run the game. We have this mentality that like you go to a professional or you go to a doc, whether it's like a doctor for a head cold or a therapist for mental health counseling, you go to that person when there's a problem and only when there's a problem. And then you see that person, follow their treatment plan until that problem is no longer present, in which case you no longer see them. And I feel like in kind of medical health, it's come a little bit better that we know that preventative care is far and away much better than catching things early, like things like that. That's all better than letting them continue to become problems. So we do know that, yeah, going for like a yearly pap smear, for example, if you have a cervix, going for yearly blood work, even just with your regular primary care, even if nothing is wrong, we know to do those things that can, and of course, as some of us get older, things like colonoscopies, mammograms, what have you, those types of screenings are considered routine, and insurance companies pay for them because they know that it's better to pay for a mammogram than to have to pay for breast cancer treatment. So, and I hate to say it, but it boils down to money, right? Like it's more cost effective for them to pay for a mammogram and a round of chemo if something pops up than for them to have to pay for surgeries and multiple types of chemo and things like that. It's more cost effective for them to do preventative type care. Which it sucks that our whole medical system is based off of profits and money, but it's a system we work in, right? And at least they're coming a long way to know that routine medical screenings are actually beneficial. But when it comes to mental health, there's still a bit of a stigma. It's kind of like you don't go to therapy unless you quote unquote need it. And that's something that I honestly kind of grappled with too, because there are still times where like, my therapist and I don't have a whole lot to say to each other. And I'm still paying her for my insurance is paying her for the hour. That said, having an established relationship with a therapist, being able to rely on her and book sessions more frequently than once a month if I need them. I'm somebody who struggled with my mental health my entire life. It was not diagnosed or managed. I went to therapy when I was a teenager. At that time, kind of some of the more modern, like SSRI medications, were not widely available. They weren't nearly as widely prescribed as they are now, but also they were probably more widely prescribed in adults, but because I was a teenager, we were kind of still learning about how they affect teenage brains. So I wasn't put on any kind of medication. Frankly, therapy wasn't all that helpful because I knew my mom was sitting like right outside the door and like she was half the problem. And I was kind of, hesitant to talk about those things in therapy. I didn't start really exploring my mental health, I would say, until I at least went to college. And even then I still had that mentality of like, okay, well, something's wrong, like I'm in crisis. That's when you go to your therapist, not routinely. And honestly, I was in my 30s before I kind of started like just accepting the fact like I need to routinely be seeing a therapist. And it makes sense to establish, it's kind of like somebody who like dyes your hair right, or like cuts your hair for that matter. Like the relationship you have with that person is likely longstanding. You go to them regularly, maybe not as regularly as you should, but like you still go. And you kind of, have a set relationship with that person. So that was kind of what I set myself up for. And I think honestly, that's what has been a big difference maker for me in terms of how I have progressed in kind of my own healing journey, because you're not always going to be in crisis. And to be fair, like my therapist doesn't do a whole lot of the work, but it's kind of like that accountability is kind of bringing things up when they're not like a huge overwhelming issue, but it's kind of something of like, well, over the next month, let's maybe kind of work on unpacking that. It's the consistency and having somebody that has, both an evidence-based approach, but also, kind of objective in terms of my life, right? Because I have friends and family and things like that that I talk to about these things on a somewhat regular basis, but those people are not objective, right? So I think it's really important to have that support system. And I understand that, like, I'm fortunate in that I have both the financial capacity as well as the insurance to see somebody on a regular basis. um and given some evidence that has come out recently about some of kind of like the cheaper options like BetterHelp and stuff like that, I would I would not encourage you to use those at this time. However, make it when you can, right? So it's kind of like that's kind of how I treat my hair color, for example. Like right now it is it is fading out, and I just, like the amount of money that it would cost me to make it look the way I wanted to, that's just like not a priority for me right now. But so it doesn't have to be like every single month, but it could be every 3 months. It could be even every 6 months is better than like not talking to a therapist at all. So I think it kind of that for me has been a big transition into really kind of like surviving versus thriving. And with that, it has come to unpack a lot, and kind of a lot of my feelings of how I was essentially too much. I was told, not that I actually was too much, but I was told I was too much. Most of my life, right? I was told I was too assertive. I was told I was too aggressive. I was told I was too needy, too honestly, I was told at some point that I was too smart. Just too much. Like you were just too much, and the subtext of that is you were too much for a woman, or too much for a girl. And that's kind of where I've been really unpacking a lot of my own emotions and kind of my own response to that, because when you're told that from a young age, and I would imagine many people listening to this who have been socialized as women will hear that loud and clear, that you were told, you have to be quiet, you have to be calm, you have to be agreeable. And when you're told that, and it's, my husband, the conversation I had with my husband was kind of how, like, what are specific instances, like how was this communicated to you? And frankly, I struggled to give him examples simply because, like, it's not that overt, at least not anymore. It's much more just kind of baked in to our day-to-day lives. And it's honestly at this point, now I'm in my mid 30s, I honestly don't even like notice it anymore, because it's just kind of that's the way it is. And through kind of some of this like self-healing journey, I have kind of become awakened to the way, like, well, wait a minute, no, like, yes, that's the way it is, but that's not the way it should be, right? And when that happens, you get angry, right? And for me, anger usually translates to being loud about it, which creates this dissonance within myself, because it's like I'm angry and I'm loud, and those are the two things I was told my entire life that I should not be. And even though I like rationally recognize right now that that is bullshit, it is still deeply woven into my core beliefs and my core self, and it's really hard to unpack. And it kind of feels like you're going against yourself. So I hope that like somebody out there can like relate to, I've talked to enough, at least people who have been socialized as women, to know that that's not like, it's not just me. If you are someone who is either identifies or is socialized as a man, understand that like basically every woman in your life is going through that to some extent. And it's really challenging, because you can either kind of accept that, the narrative you've been told is that you're too much and you have to be less constantly, and you're constantly making yourself be less, and you're constantly making yourself quieter, and basically shaming yourself for ways in which you are not able to achieve that. So ways in which you are too loud, and for ways in which you need too much, for ways in which you are too demanding. You feel like shit about those things, even though they are in reality reasonable demands. That's one route some people take, and that was the route I took for a very long period of time, decades of my life, up until I was probably like 32, 33, to be completely honest. Or you kind of go the route I have, which I think a lot of women kind of my age have kind of come to this conclusion where it's okay, I recognize that that is bullshit, and I'm ready to be loud, and I'm ready to be myself, and I'm ready to not apologize for it. But you have this like core conditioning of you're supposed to be quiet or internalized, and it just feels like your new self is grappling with your old self, so that shame and all of that is still there, and it's a lot to unpack and it's a lot to carry. And it's a lot to explain to somebody who doesn't understand it. And the people who don't understand it who are men, and the people who don't understand it are women who are still kind of living in the like women should be less mentality. And I don't mean that to shame anyone who's kind of living in the like women should be less mentality. Like that is a safer choice, right? That is a much safer choice. It is going to create less conflict in your life. And so I understand that, right? It is a matter of like survival in a lot of cases, not a matter of taking the easy way out. Um, and I get that, and I want you to know that like just because you have not followed the path that I have, that your feelings about it are valid, your approach to it is also valid. You're doing what's best for you physically and emotionally right now, and that is okay. Um, that said, for those of us who have kind of turned a new leaf, so to speak, um, it's really challenging. It's really, really challenging, um, because it does create conflict. Um, and sometimes that conflict is amongst people who you value and care about very deeply. And I just want to be clear that like I have lost relationships as a result of this. And I know that like the mentality is okay, well, great, you lost relationships with people who weren't there to serve you. That is true. And it hurts a lot, to come out and be your true self and kind of have the kind of have that mentality that like I'm too much, basically be confirmed, that's for some people you are too much, and that's hurtful. And in my for me personally, that is still a better choice than trying to mute myself. But that said, I understand that that choice is not for everybody, so I want to be clear that you guys see me come out here as kind of this like powerful, empowered person. I've had to like knock down some doors, and I've lost some people along the way to get there. For me, that was still the right choice. But please understand that if you kind of choose to do this work and take this path, that will be the approach, that will be a consequence for you as well. Right now in our society, there's just really no other option. You're going to lose people. And that doesn't mean that like they're not part of your life in any way, but they're not like that closeness that you feel to them, that relation, it's going to shift. It just is. Um, and it for me, it showed up in a very big way in my most recent job. Not the job I have now, but my last job. There was a lot of internalized misogyny amongst management. There was a lot of overt misogyny amongst upper management, and basically a woman who came in and made noise and demanded change, was not treated kindly, and I was basically forced out. Again, that ultimately resulted in me learning a very big lesson and transitioning to a position where my loudness and demandingness is actually valued and appreciated. Um, but and ultimately it's a better fit. But there was a period of time where I had a significant amount of self-doubt, about myself, about my approach to life, about my professionalism. Um, and none of that was true or valid. None of that doubt was true or valid, but it was conditioned in me, and it's not something that I can just turn off. um so I want to be clear with you all that kind of when you see me come out here all mad and empowered, please know that I am alienating certain people and things from my life. And I have come to a place where I'm okay with that, but that has not been a decision that has come easy. It took me probably a better part of a decade to fully unpack. I'm still unpacking it. I'm still unlearning it. I still have significant support systems in place for it. And to be honest, those support systems were the difference maker. So I talked about my therapist earlier, but also I have like a professional association of people that I work with, and kind of specifically entrepreneurs. In dietetics, we are almost all women. That's that there's plenty, there are non-women providers, but it kind of, anybody who's an entrepreneur in dietetics, it's largely women based. So it's not just entrepreneurs and like half the room is men. No, like it's all based entrepreneurs, which is great. It's kind of two birds with one stone for me. So I have support groups for that. I also have, I pay for kind of a mentorship program currently for RDs who are in the like anti-diet space, because that's another big one. Another kind of tangent that many of you may not know is that I originally started my career trying to promote weight loss medications, and I in years of practice, you learn. I educated myself, and it kind of eventually became very apparent to me that like weight loss is not the answer to all of the world's problems like we think it is. And then I took a shift pivot and kind of took this anti-diet approach, which I think most of you know is not typical, but that is another area of my life. It's not about me per se, but it's professionally, there's a lot of friction there between myself and other dietitians, and even just medical providers. And again, I'm firm in my principles. I believe in what I'm doing, and I believe in my message, but that doesn't mean it's not hard. It's not hard to go up every single day against doctors and other dietitians and just an entire healthcare system that is designed to tell people, one, to blame people for their weight, and then two, to tell them that the answer to all their health problems is to lose weight. So again, that's another area of my life that I need support, and I pay for that support. I've paid for business coaching in the past. Getting those good support systems in place, and like if you have to pay for them, fine, right? Like I finally kind of came to a place where like I can either pay somebody who knows what they're doing, kind of, the same way I ask people to pay me because I know what I'm doing. And like, yeah, they can get the same information on the internet, but like, it's going to be jarbled and confusing and maybe not appropriate for them. And then also kind of like half truths or sliced with, the nuances taken out of it. It's worth, in my opinion, obviously it's worth your money to pay a nutritionist or a dietitian to help dismantle some of that and provide you nutrition guidance. So it's also worth your money to pay a therapist to help you sort out your thoughts, or pay various support coaching programs to help support you in a mission that is maybe atypical or not mainstream. I also just surround myself with powerful women, and this is kind of where I want to close. I think, like I said, I've lost a lot of friendships just straight out, but I've also just had the dynamic of several other relationships, including my relationship with my parents, simply change. They're not as close as they were, and it was a grieving process, but we got there, and it's kind of now I can have those people safely in my life. They're not particularly toxic to me, but I'm also not going to them for certain types of support. To be honest, I'm not really going to them for any type of support. I'm going to them for kind of just casual, fun acquaintanceships. I have friends that I can count on. I have friends that will stand by me no matter what. But I think one of the hardest lessons I've learned is, kind of whatever that quote is about Einstein, like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. If you have people in your life that do consistently are unable to support you in the way you need to be supported, whether that is surrounding certain topics. So like if you have a parent, for example, who is like wrapped up in diet culture or does keto, and like you're trying to break away from that. If you have providers in your life, so like a doctor who feels like you can't have an eating disorder because you're overweight, or consistently ask you about your weight even if you're going in for like a head cold or something like that. If you find that you are not getting the support you need when you go to certain people or sources for support, you need to stop going to those people or sources for that kind of support. So if, for example, if it is like a therapist or a doctor or whatever, like you're paying them, you're the customer, like stop it. Right? Find somebody else. And I realize that that is like easier said than done, because you can't, it goes through like a trial and error process of like, is this person going to be a good fit? Is this person going to be a good fit? And that can be really challenging. And so I realize that like it's not, and it takes a lot of effort. That said, I think you can ask a few pointed questions, and certainly in like a healthcare provider, or even a therapist appointment, would be like, do you believe that fatness causes disease? And if the answer is yes, walk out the door right then. If they're willing to at least discuss nuance, kind of treat it like a job interview more than a doctor's appointment, of kind of, like, what do you need from this person? And these are things that you can even like write down. Like, what do you need from this person? What are the things that are going to make you favor them? And more importantly, what are your deal breakers? And you don't owe anybody an explanation. Just either walk out the door or don't go back to that doctor. It's that simple. When it's, personal relationships, obviously that is a little bit trickier, right? Because you may not or want to or even be able to cut that person out of your life. And that's okay. But you know believe the data, right? Believe the information that they are giving you. If they are not willing to support you, if they have opinion that differs from yours and is damaging for you to talk about, like sometimes with like politics and stuff like that, it benefits us to hear other people's opinions. But if it is something deeply emotional and it feels invalidating and unsafe for you, find people who do support that, whether it's therapy, Facebook groups, other friends, etc. And find the people that do support you in that, but also stop trying to force that person to see things your way. They will not. Or if they're going to, it's not going to be because you beat it into them, right? You're just going to end up arguing or feeling unsupported and defeated, and that's just not in your best interest, right? So sometimes it's a little bit of intentional emotional distancing from those people. And then my other thing is that, going through processes like this, it's scary. Even if you're right, it's scary because society is kind of stacked against you, because you may lose people out of your life. And my encouragement to everybody is, and kind of honestly why I have been successful in doing, is because I do it scared. I am scared. I'm scared often, and I don't think that is like a weakness. I think that's very natural response to the society we've all grown up in, because humans were meant to be kind of pack animals, right? We're meant to live in communities, and anytime you are going against the grain of what is kind of societally at large acceptable, quote unquote, that's going to be really scary, because you're fearing of isolating yourself, and some of that fear is going to be actualized in the fact that like you may lose people or relationships or things like that. Keep going. It's okay to be scared. Manage the scared. Don't let it paralyze you. Therapy again is a great option, but do it scared. It's okay to be scared. So I think that's kind of my last little bullet point of my like kind of random brain unscrambling for you all today. So I know this was a little different than kind of my usual content, but I hope that you guys kind of found some value from it. If you want more kind of just real talk ideas like this, definitely like drop suggestions for me. I would love to hear it. And if you're like, no, please go back to your organized thing, it was hard for me to follow your brain, that's fine too. Just let me know that as well. So I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next time.